Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three prakim Rambam Hilchos Mitame Mishkav U'Moshav prakim Yud Aleph and Yud Beis. We are starting with Perek Yud. Now we will be introducing in this Perek, and we're going to learn about it in all three prakim today, about what we call Tumas Am Haaretz. The word Am Haaretz literally means the nation of the land. It's a word. It's a term that Chazal gave during the Second Temple era to people that were not that learned and they were not that particular in certain areas of halacha, including the laws of Tumah v'Tara, in contrast to the Am Haaretz, the ones who were very careful in keeping up the details of all of these halachas were called Chaverim. All right, so we're going to learn about the status of the items of Am Haaretz, or even more than that, the rabbinic Tumah that is always on the Am Haaretz, Tumas Am Haaretz. And we're going to learn how someone will go from being the Am Haaretz by undertaking, as we'll see in front of a group of people, that he or she are going to be behaving like a chaver, and that's called Kabbalas Divrei Chaverus. And once they do that, then their status changes and they no longer have on them and on their utensils Tumas Am Haaretz. Now, we will also learn in this chapter that if you have a person that was until now known to be a chaver, and now we suspect that he's no longer trustworthy, so the rule will be that Einoi Neman La'olam Ache Yevoda Shechazar B'Teshuva Shalema, as we'll describe, at least by Al Peh, what that tshuva entails of. Perek HaSidi has 11 halachas, and let us go through this slowly. Halacha Aleph. Am Haaretz, a person, an unlearned person. Okay? Af Apisha Yisrael Hu, even though he's a full-fledged Yid, and the Yeshle B'Torah V'Mitzvahs. And we're not only speaking about a Jew as a Jew as a Jew, speaking about a Jew who generally is someone who's keeping Torah mitzvahs. But like we mentioned, he's not that particular in certain areas of halacha, including the laws of Tumah v'Tara. Just want to add another layer to that. There is no obligation on a Yid to maintain a level of purity. Meaning that if a Jew wants to be Tameh, I'm not usher to become Tameh. Actually, we have over here Chevra Kadisha, many times it's a mitzvah to become Tameh, by Tumas Meitz. But I'm saying there's no prohibition for me becoming Tameh unless I'm a Kohen, corpse Tumah, and I don't have to maintain my halachic status of Tahara. So when you take that, also, there's so many details. If you don't live it, it's very hard to remember all these details. There were certain people that became lax. And one thing leads to the other. So you're not that careful and you forget some details. Now, if you forget details when it comes to these halachas, I might think that I'm pure, and I'm not. You know what we have the similar today? Kosher. Kosher is a lot simpler than these halachas. But still, some people mamish think that they have a kosher home. And they're making all the sacrifice. They only spend the food in the kosher markets, and they don't mix the meat and the milk. They do all that. But they're not knowledgeable enough in some details. And it could be that there was a mixture of meat and milk in their house and they don't know about it. You understand? So when you don't eat in their homes, you're not doing it because you're saying they're not observant, but they don't, that is the Am Haaretz concerning the laws of Tumah and Tara. Nevertheless, Hareyu Becheskas Tameh, the Chazal gave that person a status of your Becheskas Tameh, and listen to this, Ubigadav, and one's garments are Tameh on the level of Midras. So now you understand why the Rambam was putting it into the series. But since you have a Zav and a Zava and a Nida and a Yeledes, let's say that the nida is the most common, the nida and the zava. So if a nida sits on garments, even though garments were meant to be worn, but like we learned already a little bit yesterday, every garment is also sometimes used to be laid upon. If you're going to sleep and you need another pillow, you're going to take your shirt, your pants, and you're going to put it under your head. So if she sits on it, she might not even be aware that she sat on it. It becomes tameh on the level of an av. But we are saying this litahara is amazing. In other words, even I want to go more than that. Some people in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, on the opposite side of this coin, they took upon themselves a chumrah that even though they were only eating chulin, they were not kohanim. They're going to eat the chulin with the same standard that's used when you eat taharas. So they had a very high level of tahara, even though there was no such obligation. So they needed to say that if the garments of Amaratzim midrabanan are an av, that means if they would even touch the garment of an Amaretz, they would become a Rishon. Can you imagine? Ve'im nagu bigadov, and if the clothing of the Am Haaretz touched either oichlin or mashkin, food or drink, harei heim tamei, it becomes tamei. Ve'im naga becheichleres ma'aviroi, right? So again, the clothing is tamei on the level of an av. If it entered the airspace of the common utensil, which was made then out of shard, made out of pottery, klei cheres, it made a tamei. Now, here's a big chiddush. Normally, this is a tumah midrabanan. No, it's this Amaretz. If he tells you he's tamei, yeah, he's tamei. We're speaking about someone who's saying that he's tahor. On a biblical level, we believe him. We're speaking about a person that generally keeps Torah mitzvahs. Just he doesn't know enough. He's not that careful. Normally, when it comes to rabbinic tumah, if something truma becomes tamei only midrabanan, because maybe it's tamei, like doubt, can't burn it. You're not allowed to burn tumah. That's Torah. This tumah is so chamur that v'sorfen es truma al magohan, that if they touch truma, even though their tumah is only based on a doubt, but as we learned over there in the Mishnah, the Mishnah actually says that there are 6 doubts for which you burn truma, which is the chiddush, because normally for all other sveikas you can't burn it, you can't eat it, but you have to wait until it becomes tummy. You have to wait until it gets ruined. But this is a very chamur dika rabbinic tumah. It's called tumas am haaretz. The einon ne'emanim ala taharos. It's not that we suspect that they're lying. That's very important. No, they're saying what they call in English their truth, but their truth is a lie. Which they can say I'm tahar, but they don't know enough. Because they're not knowledgeable enough. Now, anyone that falls under this umbrella of the Am Haaretz remains under this presumption that he, she, and their garments, imagine their garments have the tum on the level of a midras. The ein the nemen ala taharos, and we don't trust them if they say, this is pure, until they accept upon themselves all of the restrictions of chaverus is plural for a chaver. Chaver was the term that we used for people that were very careful in all of the mitzvahs, and they were called chaverim because really kol yisrael chaverim zelozeh. Really, we are all connected to each other, and the ultimate connection between Yidden is all based on God and based on the Torah. If it's not based on that, then it's not. Then it's a superficial chaverus. So, who are the real chaverim? The people that are the most observant. Now, mahem divrei chaverus, like we mentioned, the Am Haaretz was not particular in some areas of halach. We're not speaking about someone who's not observant. They kept Shabbos as Shmuli 1,000%. They kept kashrus 1,000%. Tumah v'tara and truma somaisis. But let's speak about tumah and tara. Remember these details. So he sheikabel, all of this person has to accept upon himself. That I'll be careful with all sources of impurity, which, mind you, is not so simple, right? As we have been learning already a couple of weeks. So easy even for tumas meis to go on. Remember the tumas meis, halal cherev. If a meis touches a keli, touches an adam, that adam is still av. You have to be very careful. Ubataharos, and anything that is pure, you'll make the effort not to contaminate it. Like we mentioned, even though you're not mechuyev, but you're going to do that nonetheless. And you will be careful. This is the beginning of it all. Benetilas yodayim, and properly washing your hands, purifying them. And I want you to know that netilas yodayim, the whole netilas yodayim is a rabbinic, because miday raisa, either you're tahar or you are tummy. When a person is tummy, you know how they get out of the tumah by going to the mikveh. There's no such a thing miday raisa as washing your hands to get rid of tumah. Now, true, in the Beis Hamikdash before the Kohanim did avodah, they only washed their hands and the feet. But that's a higher level of service, a higher level of purity, getting ready to do service in the temple. The Chachamim were the ones that they gave birth to this whole idea that a person's hands can be tummy to the exclusion of the rest of the body. And since the problem is only with the hands, all you need to do is wash the hands. Again, sometimes some people have very lax attitudes towards rabbinic rules. So part of being makabel, I'm going to become a chaver, is making this a public. We'll see how it's a public hachlata that I will be careful in a tilas yadayim b'taharasa. Now, just for people over here, we're not referring to what we call today netilas yadayim, which is the washing the hands in the morning. We're not talking that, of course. We're not practicing any of this. Or we're tummy to main mace. It's so difficult to remain tahor because tumah spreads very easy. Yeah, there's no Beis Hamikdash. We're not going today to a place where you're not allowed to enter when you're tummy. So we're not that careful and we're not that knowledgeable. Saying it was a big thing, this. And not to get, whether it is to buy, whether it is to get as a gift, any produce, any food that became wet. Now, produce that's cut off the ground, that never got wet with the will of the owner after it was cut off the ground, is not even susceptible to becoming tummy. So there's no problem with that. But anything that could have become tummy, you're not going to receive from Amma Aretz. It made life a little bit more complicated, as people can imagine. You'll never go to his house to be his guest. Now, guys, everything, is certain values competing with competing values. There is a huge upside in breaking bread with another Jew. We know that. But on the other hand, if you're going to go to his house, unbeknownst to you, he might touch your garments. It's difficult to see that. It's normal. You see a person, you pat them on the back. Tumas Ha'aretz means he's tummy on the level of an av. That means if he touches your garments, they become a rishon, which means then you would have to take it to the mikvah. So the only way to avoid it is mamash to stay where you can't go to be in his house. And don't invite him over, or his garments. Don't invite him over in his garments, because you might sit on his garments, or your family member might sit on the edge of his garments. And what did we learn yesterday? That once that the garments become tummy on the level of an av, anyone who sits even only on the garment of the Ha'aretz will become a rishon. Imagine, and then that person will touch food. The food will become a sheni. So there has to be a certain amount of separation. So all of the details, and we have to get moving quicker, that is what the person specifically has to take upon oneself. We'll see in the presence of three chaverim that going forward, he's going to enumerate every single one of these details. And then we'll see. He has to practice it for 30 days, and then he'll be a chaver. Now, if a person says, I want to accept upon myself everything other than one of the laws that we mentioned in Halacha Aleph, if you don't accept it as a chaver. If a person is not known to be a chaver, but he was observed, someone saw him shmuli when he did not know that he's being observed. And we saw that he's careful in these halachas. And he didn't know that. He didn't know that someone is looking at him. Then, he's right away accepted as a chaver. But don't forget, guys, there's always two things in Yiddishkeit. There's practice, and then there's learning the halachas. So even though this person is practicing whatever the person knows, there's always a fear that maybe this person doesn't know enough. This is Gavaldik. Get to this row over here. We'll get this. There we go. So first we accept it. And then and then we teach him all of the details. Finished. Now, if you didn't manage to observe him, how he behaves when he doesn't know that he's being observed, then we don't first accept him and then teach him. Then the other way around. First we teach him and then we accept him. Now, in other words, accepting a person doesn't mean from 0 to 100. First, the easiest thing of the above is getting into the habit of constantly washing your hands. And when they would wash their hands, another thing. Not when I say constantly, whenever they would eat truma. This is not the OCD people that are walking around 50 times a day washing their tilas yadayim. That prior to touching truma, they would always wash their hands. On a biblical level, you don't have to do that, because if you don't know that you're tummy, why would you have to do that? Rabbinically, stam yadayim are shniyos. A sheni also cannot be metamachulin. The reason why we wash our hands before we eat bread, that's already a takana that began with Shlomo HaMelech. But otherwise, a yid doesn't wash their hands before you eat chulin. But every time you eat truma, better. Before touching truma, you have to do netilas yadayim. That's the first thing. And to trust him whenever he says that his garments, that his kalim, or that his person is tahar, then we trust him. And if he says, now, even though we said before that if a person is being mekabel divri chavrus chutz midavar echad ein mekabel noisoi, however, there's an exception to that, and that is if a person says, I will only take upon myself anytime I'll touch truma, I'll wash my hands, then they're fine. But if a person is saying I'm being makabel all of the hachlatas other than washing my hands, then you don't accept any of his resolution. Because it's simple. When a person doesn't want to do that, which is more lenient, why would you trust him that he's going to take upon himself to behave in those areas which is more difficult? If a person says, listen, the more difficulty, and one thing I can promise you that I will never touch truma without netilas yadayim. Okay, then you trust him. The nekuda is that people, the Amaretz is not someone who we suspect is dishonest, chas v'shalom. The Amaretz is a person who's not knowledgeable enough, and there it goes, it's like a cycle. So they're a little bit lax in their behavior in certain areas, and then when you're lax, when you don't practice these halachas, you forget some details, so you don't know when you don't practice. Another thing, even after you accept him, it's not that you have to learn. So after you accept him, there's still a 30 days in which we don't know for sure if this guy knows all the halachas yet. Until he learns and he practices. Then we can presume from now on that his clothing are tired, his food and his drinks are tired. And he's believed. If you ask him, is that tired or not, you believe him, even though he's not a Torah scholar, because you don't have to be a Torah scholar in Hilchas Shabbos to know Hilchas Tumah V'Tada. It's a unique set of halachas, and as long as you are meticulous in practice and you're constantly learning, like us, even think about how do we keep Shabbos. How often is it that you hear, I didn't know you can't do that on Shabbos. But when a Yid wants to keep Shabbos and the learning and the practicing, then we trust him. Halachigim. Talmidei Chachamim hareim becheskas tahara nemanim ve'ein tzricham lekabel divrei chaveros. Until the times of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, now how are you qualified as a Talmud Chacham? The Rambam doesn't write. But if you're called a Talmud Chacham, you never needed to make this public declaration that I'm accepting upon myself to behave like a Chaver. But once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Mahago Kohanim, the word silsul, it's an interesting word. Silsul is a word that's also used. We're learning about Yosef HaTzadik. He would comb and beautify his hair. Silsul means that what happens when you comb your hair, you separate one head from the other. It means you're very meticulous, you're very careful. Silsul means astringency. To Kohanim took upon themselves astringency. They would not give their food even to a Talmud Chacham until he or she would publicly declare, I am accepting divrei chaverus. Now, even after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Zakin v'Yoshev v'Yeshiva. Either, again, when are you a Zakin? I don't know. Zakin means you're 40, Zakin means you're 90, I don't know what age it is. But when you are a Zakin, and the Ikar is that you are a part of the yeshiva. When any Bacher, any Yid that would enter the academy would have to declare that they're keeping these halachas. And it's because that's the way it used to work. As you entered the yeshiva, one of the things they asked you, are you accepting upon yourself all of the details in halacha? When you make this resolution, right, we call this hachlata. Here, halacha, it's called Kabbalah, you're being makabel. It has to be done in front of 3 other people that are chavedim. Now, on the other hand, once a family, head of a family, took upon himself divrei chaveros, so then automatically, because that's the way of the world, because children mimic what their parents do. Now, what about the mother? Same thing. The wife of a chaver, have the same status of a chaver. And not only that, that even after the chaver passes away, then we say once there was already the status conferred on his wife and children, it continues. Until, God forbid, something about their conduct will indicate that they're no longer mindful about these restrictions. Halacha vav. Now let's go in the other direction. The wife of Ha'aretz or the daughter of Ha'aretz who now marries a chaver, or if is a slave was sold to a chaver, they have to take upon themselves the chaverus kebatchila. However, Eishes chaver or the daughter of a chaver that married an Ha'aretz, this is a beautiful halacha. We don't say since their new husband is Ha'aretz, they automatically lose their status of a chaver. We don't say that. Because we assume that they are continuing to observe as they were when they were married to their first husband, or as this Eved was a Eved to the first master. And Adarabah, that's the power of a woman. Let's speak about a wife, that she will influence her husband to be better. The presumption is not that she's going to lower her standard. The presumption is that she's going to lift up the standard of her new husband. Halacha zayin, Ha'aretz shekibel all of the chaveros. And which means from now on, you're going to believe him. Listen to this. Now, he owns food already for a while. Now you believe him. Is he allowed to say the food that I had already a year is still taught? The Kalim, the Begad. And he says, that they never became Tameh. So then it depends. If other people had the permit to be involved, that means other people also touched it. So we don't say that he knows enough, even now, to say that no one else who touched it, that we don't give him. But if he was the only person that had contact with that item or with that food, then we rely on what he's saying right now. But he is the only one that's allowed to eat it. It's amazing. But because as far as someone else is concerned, they have to be afraid that this guy then was unlearned. That's the problem with not knowing. When you don't know, you think everything is good, but it might not be good. Now he's a chaver, so this is the splitting of the hair. He is believed for himself if no one else touched it. Other people cannot rely on him going back. Another rule, right? A chaver may be asked about the state, about his kalim, about his food, and he's allowed to say it is good or not good, and we don't have a problem with that. And this is in contrast to so many other areas in halacha, like just for example, we just learned in the previous series, right, about tzora'as, that even if a person is trained to say whether this is a tzora'as or not, he's never allowed to look at his own skin and say this is a nega or not. But that is because din tzora'as is a din d'oraisa. This entire tumas midrabanan. Here, a person is allowed to testify to render a ruling regarding his own stuff. Halacha ches. If a chaver becomes a tax collector or a moiches. Now, moiches generally is a tax collector. Let me just explain to you what a moiches specifically is. It was very common then in the times of Chazal that the government, say the Roman Empire, they would not go to every person to collect taxes. They didn't want the headache. They would go over to a location, to a town, to a city, and they would say, from this city, we expect to get $1 million in taxes. One person would give the government the $1 million, lay out the money, and they would give him the seal, the permit for him to collect taxes. What did he do with that permit? He didn't get back the $1 million. It was a business. He would collect as much as he could. So the moiches was presumed to be a dishonest person. Or any normal tax collector in the times of Chazal, they were presumed to be dishonest people. I'm saying this in the times of Chazal because here in America right now, if someone gets a job at the IRS, they don't have the status of being a ganef. I disagree. So Shmuley disagrees. Let me go like this. I can say with all respect to, I love Brazil, that at least when I lived in Brazil, every tax collector in Brazil was a ganef. And a halachic presumption, because what happens is they go into your business, they find a problem and they expect to be bribed. It was a certain type of a line of work where you can't even blame them because they get paid such a little salary. That's how they made a parnas. So the Gabi Amelach or Moiches v'chayoytzim, the moment a person is in a business that is presumed to be a dishonest business, Sometimes we say in halacha, just because you're not kosher in one area doesn't mean you're not kosher in another area. When it comes to this, if you're not an honest person with money, you are no longer a chaver. Now, if you get out of that line of profession, now you are like any other person, but you have to be makabel again in public that I'm accepting upon myself to behave like a chaver. Halacha 9, a person who made such a public acceptance, but now so if he becomes suspect to one specific matter, then we don't allow that to spill over. However, there is a certain spillover. If someone is suspect not to keep halachas that are considered halachically more important, then we say then if he doesn't keep that which is less important. Is the not spillovers in the other direction. That if all we see is that he's lax lekal, then we don't say that he's also lax lechamer. Halachayut.
Why don't we say it's the same thing with the hands, what he said?
That's exactly that. But that's a proof to that. In other words, if a person says that I'm going to be careful with Natilas Yadayim, we trust him for Natilas Yadayim, which is kal. We don't trust him for that, which is more. Now let me say better. If a guy took upon himself the whole chavedus, and then we see before he touches truma, he doesn't wash his hands. Then we say, if you don't even do that, that's so easy. It's taka so easy. Washing Natilas Yadayim, we practice that today before we eat bread. What's the big deal? You know how difficult it was to make sure? It was very difficult. Like you can't go to a guest, you can't shake people's hands, you can't touch anyone's clothing, you can't allow them to touch your clothing. Saying to remain tahar was much more difficult. So that's the point. If a guy is not even keeping it till then he loses trustworthiness for everything else. Halacha, but no, if a guy is gonna have a amaretz, a guest, we don't suspect that he didn't wash his hands before truma. That's what we say. That he's still doing. It fits with what we learned above. If he becomes suspect regarding taharos, for example, shemacha, this is very bad. This is the worst. Means that he's selling foods that are tamei by saying they're tahar. The equivalent today would be someone who's selling food saying it's kosher when it's not. This is much worse. This is different. See, again, we're not. It's a bad example because kashrus, I have to keep kosher. A Jew does not have to stay in a level of tahara. We're speaking about the purity of what we're learning about right now. I can be tamei. I'm allowed to go to a cemetery. I'm not a kohen. And I can eat food, even though it means that if I went to the cemetery when I picked up the food, I made the food tam. Doesn't matter. But the much worse that I'm allowed. So, Elama, many people were careful to remain tahar. That's what we're talking about. But if a guy has something that's tummy and he's selling it that it's tahar, this is a big problem. That person may never be believed until it becomes known that the guy did tshuva shalema. Now, the Rambam here doesn't explain what that means. First of all, the word tshuva, what's tshuva shalema? But if you remember, we learned this a few times in the Gemara. In some areas, a person can do tshuva. The tshuva shalema that we are talking about is that the person has to move to a place where no one knows. And we have to observe without him knowing that he's being observed. Either that he found a lost article that is of significance. He could have kept it. It's a lost article. And he made the effort to return it to its owner. Or that he shechted an animal that's expensive. And there was a question whether it's kosher or not. And he said, I'm going to be strict and I'm not going to eat it because, the lungs has a certain sircha on it. This has to happen in a setting where he doesn't even know that people are looking at it. It's not so simple. In other words, there has to be some sort of action that he takes in a certain set of circumstances that becomes clear that going forward, he's making a big effort not to break any of Hashem's rules. Final halacha yudalev. Choshad al Shvi'is, which is a whole different topic, right? The laws of Shemitah or al hatruma. What does that mean? That's a terrible thing that he's selling truma as ordinary produce. If a guy is doing that, then we don't trust anything regarding truma and tara. Which is Shemitah, which is truma, then we automatically suspect that he doesn't keep rabbinic law. Another din. The Rambam is trying to explain why is it that when it comes to foods, it's only rabbinic tumah. I want you to know like this, guys. Remember what I'm saying, that foods, we're going to learn this soon. When a person touches, let's say, an av, I touch an av, means you are a zov, or someone is a nida. If I touch a nida, I become a rishon. If I touch food or drink, even non-truma, it becomes a sheni, midoiraisa. But if food becomes tummy on a level of a rishon, which is normally what happens, midoiraisa, food, guys, remember, cannot impart tuma to other food. Even though, why not? Rishon to a sheni, that's the rule. But midrabanan, it could. That's the point that Rambam is trying to make. No, it's food being tamei normally is a darabanan. So if we find that this person is selling truma and he's saying that this truma is chulin, and that's making other people violate biblical halachas, so we certainly don't trust him in rabbinics. Now, if someone is suspect, I'm not observing a halacha, you have to add a nuance. As long as this person does not know that this is a prohibition for which you get malchus, that changes everything, doesn't know that. Then, he doesn't lose his trustworthiness for him being a witness regarding someone else or to judge someone else. Because even if a person is not careful for himself, he won't sin for someone else. So even though we know that this person is not keeping a certain halacha, as long as he doesnn't know that there's a malchus chiyuv here, he's only breaking it because he's hungry, because he wants to benefit. But he's not going to break God's rules if he's going to testify regarding someone else, because who's going to benefit from it to someone else? That's a general rule. So here the Rambam already reviewed some general concepts of how much trustworthiness does someone lose if they're not trustworthy in a certain area. Bottom line is that we're just recapping. This is a very important chapter. Perek Yud, we introduced the rabbinic presumed tumah on the Am Ha'aretz and on the begodim of the Am Ha'aretz, that they are tamei on the level of a midras, and the concept of a chaver, and how do you go from an Am Ha'aretz by being mekabel divrei chaveros with all of the specifics at kan Perek Yud. And now we're moving on to Perek Yud Aleph. Now Perek Yud Aleph is going to teach us the exceptions where the Am Ha'aretz will be neman. We're also going to learn that klei cheres, amazing, all earthenware utensils, we're speaking about earthenware that was burnt up in a kiln, that depending on their location, as we'll see, connected to Yerushalayim, there is an nemanus that they are to hide. As we'll learn, that in Yerushalayim, at HaKodesh, the Chachamim made a takana that you cannot have the factories that make earthenware utensils, because they are really big furnaces, and when they are being in function, there's a lot of black smoke that comes out of it, and that black smoke adheres to the walls of the buildings of the city, and it ruins the beauty of Yerushalayim. So to keep the beauty of Yerushalayim, that type of business was not allowed there. So if you can't manufacture them there, it means that there was, to a certain degree, a shortage of klei cheres, which was the most typical keli people used. Now, since this whole tumah of Am Ha'aretz is only midrabanan, everything is a balance. They didn't want to impose that tumah midrabanan if it's going to create a kelim shortage. So in Yerushalayim and its vicinities, there was a presumption of tahara on the klei cheres, unless you know otherwise. And furthermore, we're going to learn that then that's mukim and then zman, that during the regel, all the 3 Yom Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, the rule is tumas Am Ha'aretz, whatever we on them and on their begodim, is removed. K'tohoirehim chashuvim. Chavra Perek Yud Aleph has 12 halachas. Let us start with halacha Aleph. Kfar B'Yarnu is going back to Perek Yud Beis of Hilchos Paraduma, that Sha'ami Ha'aretz Namarim Al Taharas Paras Chatos, that anything related, anything that's being used for the ashes of the red heifer, everyone understood the importance of it. Everyone understood the severity of it, because imagine, God forbid, if the ashes of the mechatos doesn't function, the tahar of Klal Yisrael depends on that. So everyone appreciated its importance. Everyone was very medagdek, even the Am Ha'aretz. that midrabanan is presumed to be tamei, and there's no nemanos, he is neman. Number one, guys, remember. And number two, now how often did they make already the paraduma? So we learned that up until now, the ganze maisa was 9. It's not that common making it. But let me tell you something that's a lot more common. They are trustworthy regarding the purity, the status of Tara on both wine and oil that are going to be used to pour on the altar, that are going to be part of what we call the Nesachim. Meaning, if they say Taharu, we believe them. Also, mipnei chumrasoi nisoharim boy. This is going on the mizbeach. Number 3, guys. They are believed regarding the status of tahara, right? To say that the trumas tahira, while it's the pressing season for wine, and when it's the pressing season for the oil, that's called gitois wine. Badim, these are the names of the places that presses wine or grape or olive. Badim is oil. Everyone prior would purify themselves. They would purify their kelim. Why is that? Because why would they do that? What's the motivation? I'll tell you the motivation. Anything that's taught is more expensive. Because whenever there's a financial motivation, even people that for their own lives are not that lax, like all of these companies today in America, they're making kosher food. Why are they making kosher food? Halavai, because they believe in kashrus. Even the people that are not that themselves into kashrus, because it's a financial good thing. It's worth it financially. The financial difference in price between tahar wine, tamei oil, and tamei oil was enough that everyone was very careful. And we believe them. It's a beautiful, not the opposite, since, like you can say, it's a big nesoyin. Like if it's tamei, the guy's not that frum, he'll say that it's stored to sell. No one will do that. See, the point is, people have to understand, Ma'aretz was only someone, he kept other mitzvahs. Tuman Taretz, like we mentioned, I don't have to be taught. So since he didn't keep it that often, he forgot the details. But he's a trustworthy person, b'chlal, in other areas. So we believe him. Now, that's only during the season. Now we're going to have more details about this later. About 70 days prior, before 70 days prior, we're going to get back a little bit in the Rambam of the season of the Gittas and the Bad. Now, halacha yud base. However, aber in Yiddish, koyin shevelei ha'ma'aretz chavis yain hashem shel truma. Ha'ma'aretz brings a koyin, wine or oil, and he's bringing it to him. Guys, let's add the words not during the season. That's not during the season. A koyin should not accept it. You get it? In other words, what happens? Here's the question. Tama Oretz is telling the kohen, no. I made this. When did I make it? I made it during the season. Doesn't matter. If you get it to him during that season, we're going to get to day soon. Then you can take it. Not then you can't take it. So you know what Tama Oretz is going to do? Tama Oretz wants to sell it to a kohen. There's a simple solution. He made it. He knows that if he brings it now, it's too late. He'll keep it in this house until the next season. Then I'll bring it to him. Ad gasaba. And then yikableno. Even though the kohen knows that this was not made now, this was made the last season. The kohen knows that had the Ha'aretz brought it to him in the interim, he would not be allowed to accept it on the status of that it started. That's the rule, but he can accept it now. And let's remember over here, guys, if there would be a Tumah Vada, it would not make sense. All of this, there's a suffix. And it's not a suffix that Midoirai said you would have to be Machmer. The Rabbanan decided to be Machmer. So they had the right, to make these rules. Halachim, Ha'aretz shenol base badoi, if Ha'aretz locked his olive press or his wine press, when people stop pressing, he locked it. And he left the key in the hands of the kohen. This is so similar to leaving the key in the hand of the mashgiach today. No mashgiach is needed. Now, even though it's after the time of the gitois, the kohen comes and he upeseach befanav umatbiloi. All he needs to do is, guys, like the Ha'aretz wants to do some more pressing. The kohen has to take the Ha'aretz to the mikveh. He has to take him to the mikveh. It's funny, like you can't say I went. or he has to watch him going to the mikvah, and the Amoritz can press it right now, and you can buy. In other words, there's two issues, guys. There's the person and the kalim. So since the door was locked, the kalim could not have become tummy. So it's still we extend that heter. The person taken to the mikvah. The only thing that you can buy from the Ma'aretz is Zeisim Arom She'em Sharim, is the olives themselves, the grapes themselves, because they're not Makabal Tuma, at least not Minat Torah. I'm saying a lot Minat Torah, because when you harvest certain product, sometimes liquids does ooze out of them. Happens to be, like we explained, it's not just about something becoming wet, but there has to be the willingness or the contentment of the owner. When it comes to other products, we say, he doesn't care if it got wet. Actually, some products, if they look wet, they sell better. They look fresher. But since wine and oil, you want the liquid for the wine or for the oil. You don't want it to ooze out. You don't want it to ooze out. So at the Minat Torah, for sure, it's not machshir those products. Halacha dal. If the Amaris brings the kohen a barrel during the other days of the year, and he tells him another heter, and he tells him ifrashti b'toicha kodesh. The way we'll understand this statement is that if he says that I made a vow that 1 revius of this barrel I already pledged to give to the Beis Hamikdash for Nesachim. He didn't yet separate it, but we learned in the beginning of this chapter that he's always neman on that which is going to go on the altar. So if in this barrel there's even only 1 revius, the barrel can be a mile long. Since he's neman for that revius, he's neman for the whole barrel. I feel a revius, now, that we said that nevertheless, he's not believed regarding an empty container to say that this is tahar l'trumam. This is a very big statement. That means, David, that this barrel, when he goes over to the kohen during the gitais, the kohen is allowed to accept it. What happens if he finishes using the barrel under the hands of the kohen? The kohen wants to reuse the barrel. Can't do that. Wow. He's never believed on an empty container to say that it's tahar, even like kodesh. Wow.
I thought they said this is all locked or something.
In other words, no. It's when you have wine and oil. He's always believed to say that the wine and oil, guys, is he knows it's going on the altar. It's tahar, which, by the way, means that when the wine and the oil is in the container, we also have to believe him regarding the keli. How can that be tahar if the keli is not tahar? But if he has empty containers and we're telling him, listen, I'm buying these empty containers to put in it wine that's going to go on the altar. Here we don't believe him. They only gave him the manus on that which is going in the altar proper. And because from his behavior, we understand that he wants to separate some for Nesachim. Now, while the keli doven has product in it, obviously. Even before the times of the press, but that is only within 70 days. Why? What's the magic of 70 days? Because 70 days prior to the time of pressing is the time where some people already began to prepare the kelim. Since it's unlikely that people prepare more than 70 days prior to, you get it? So here again, we don't believe him on the keli. It's halacha hey was where we believe him on the keli. In halacha dalad we said we don't believe him on the keli. No, we said sometimes we believe him on the keli, but not over here. Let's focus on kelim, and like we mentioned in our intro, that will be the second big topic of this chapter. But in Yerushalayim, during the whole year, whether the keli is full, whether the keli is empty, we're speaking about klei cheres. Klei cheres will be like today in America, disposables. In other words, it was the most commonly used utensil. Everyone used klei cheres for almost anything that was not important. It was inexpensive. Nervous then, like we mentioned, that they made it. The Chachamim says you may not fabricate. There was no factories. There was no kilns in the area of Yerushalayim because the black suit would dirty up the beauty of the city. So there was a shortage. Even prior to 70 days. Now, can they say stam toid? No. But if you tell them, hey, I'm going to be using it for kodesh, then they will believe him. Bein klei dakim, whether they are thin, whether they are thick, whether they are full, whether they are empty. Even though they did not, but the irony. If it's filled with the liquid in it, they don't believe, right? He doesn't know. Now, 1 second, there's an exception. What's the exception? Exception will be, guys, the olive, the oil, and the wine during the time of the press. We believe him. If the liquid is going to be going on the altar, we believe him. We're not taking that away. But there's a possibility, the irony, that we don't believe him regarding the contents, only regarding the keli. B'shas hagitois, what did we learn before? You believe him for the oil. Once the oil left the keli, now it became empty, the keli becomes tummy. Here it's the opposite. Huh? The Chachamim felt that this takon is something that's going to ruin. If you can't trust him regarding the kelim in Yerushalayim, then we won't have kelim. It's going to be a shortage. We said in the previous chapter, how Allah paid a kiyud, that this tumas am haaretz midrabanan is so chamur midrabanan that his kelim are coming on the level of an av. The av was put inside it, and by the way, the keli remains tummy as an av. Keli becheskas tahara la kodesh. Palginan dibura. We don't say miman avshach. How can you say the keli is tar if the begadim are tummy? No, his beged remains tummy. The klei cheres, guys, keli is only klei cheres. Like we said, they were not allowed to make these factories. You couldn't make shard, you couldn't make klei cheres. Now it's not only in Yerushalayim. Now there's a city in the close proximity to Yerushalayim called Moedi'in, and we're going to understand Pshat and this and Rambam that even though he's calling it Moedi'is, even if that's the Girsa, most learn he means Moedi'in, what we call Moedi'in. Min haMoedi'in v'lefnim. Once you are already not in the city proper, closer to Yerushalayim, means if I'm going from outside to Yerushalayim, I passed through and I already exited Moedi'in on the other side. I'm already going even closer to Yerushalayim. From there, you have this naman klichares. If you didn't even enter Moedi'in or lachutz einamanim, what about in the city itself? Moedi'in satzma depends. When keitzad, if the chaver is nichnas, nichnas means he's going from outside Yerushalayim towards Yerushalayim. So he entered the city going to Yerushalayim. The Am Haaretz is coming back, going to the, he's going to Beersheba. Ukleicheres biyadoi. Because the chaver is on the way to Yerushalayim. The Am Haaretz is going away from Yerushalayim. Then even in the city, neman b'medias lemishu toir la kodesh. Regarding kodesh, guys, don't forget, never truma, only for kodesh, only for everything we're learning now is concerning kodesh. Okay. And why is that? Because the chaver did not have an opportunity to buy this pot from him previously. They just met. And since they're going and the chaver wants to go to Yerushalayim, he's the one that needs kalim for kodesh. So they were matter even more. But if shneim nechnasim means that both going to Yerushalayim. So I have a simple thing. Why do you have to buy it from him right now? You're anyways going together. Go, the Chachamim said, min hamoedias vilafnim. So wait until you are outside the city towards Yerushalayim. Or if they're both going out means that they had an opportunity to buy it before. If someone had this opportunity, then I'm sorry, you didn't take it. We're not going to extend it to you. Halacha zayin. Kador, a potter. Shehevi kederes. V'henicham lefnim and hamoedias. And he placed it down in this location. And people are coming to buy it, and he's saying to her the same, right? And indeed, that's this leniency that someone bought a pot from them, and now they entered Yerushalayim. So we say it's tahar, but only la kodesh avalei l'tuma. Kamay shabiyarnu lokach kedei v'yatzavachutz l'medias. Even more, if you bought it in the right location, you bought it mina medias v'lefnim. But now you bought it and you went out of Moedi'in, then invited to Meya. It loses this heter. Bein l'truma, bein l'kodesh. Afal pisha, hein hakadesh. These are the pots. That's the same powder. Listen, is it tight or tummy? Mimanavshach. No, ein emon emma. Elo lefnim and amidis. Halacha ches. If you buy it directly in the factory, Shmuli, that means you bought it in a place that you're buying it from the furnace. No one touched it. It could not have become tummy. And here tohid means not only lakodesh letruma. We don't say shema naga ma'aretz. No, because when you buy it in there's a furnace. The furnace finished. They open up the furnace. Now you're going into but to pick your kelim. And even now in the furnace itself, the different rows of pots, even the most outer row, the outermost row, the one that people outside have the easiest time touching. I feel like when I say the Hadishim, still it's fine. Even if other people already bought the first right side of this row, tuma on the kelim that are still in the kitchen, in the kiln. Halacha 9. This entire Pedek, this entire sugya of Tumas Ha'aretz during Regel, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos is mamish ketohidem chi chashuva. Everyone automatically changes to tohida. Shekol Yisrael chaverim hem regol. How beautiful is that? And automatically the keleim kulan, not only klei cheres, and all of their food and all of their drink are tohidem beregel mipnei shehakol mitarim atzmam ba'ilum laregel. The fikar cheinamonim kol yimay regel bein ala kodesh even on truma. But the moment the regel goes away, retroactive, they become tamei. So we're seeing this throughout, and not listen. If they were tahar and the guy was with me, we were dancing together. So this Mashiach, what do you mean? I know nothing happened to him. He was in the base on Medrash. The moment the regel is over, boom, he's tummy again. Now listen to this: if you opened up a barrel on the regel, or if you began to sell your dough during the regel, you know what that means? It means when you open up a barrel, when you sell it, you the seller, the Amaretz, I'm putting my cup in it, I'm touching it. During the regel, it was okay. The moment the regel passes, everything that's remaining in this barrel, everything that's in this dough, because it was touched by an Amar. I remember learning this was really a machloikes in Tanoim. I forgot who said what, but Tana says, no, if you're going to do that, then when it comes to the end of the Yom Tov, they're not going to want to sell anything, because they're not going to want to touch it. We don't say that. The regel, there's a heter. After the regel, it becomes tummy. For Afapi, that this guy only touched it during the regel, and then we said he's a chaver. In other words, after the Yom Tov, retroactively, we say that he was impure. Halacha Yud Aleph, achar regel, meaning b'matzoi Yom Tov. Listen to this: all of the kelim that are in the holy temple will toiveld. B'pnei shenogu b'hem ami ha'aretz during the regel, during the chag. Now, during the chag, we had no problem. But now that we introduced that even though during the regel, they have the tahoirin, but retroactively they're considered tummy, everything has to be taken to the mikvah. They would ask the Amaratzim one thing: don't touch the shulchan. How is it possible for them to touch the shulchan? So the Gemara tells us, I remember at least twice, that during Yom Tov, they would take out the shulchan, they would take it out. It means they would take it out so close in the Azara that people, if they wanted to, would be able to touch it. They wanted for people to see how the breads are smoking hot, to show the Yidden the miracle that Hashem does every week. But normally that miracle happened in the Heichal, you couldn't see it. Now, touching the shulchan, you would have to take it to the mikvah. And if they would touch it, you would have to take it to the mikvah. And not only that, you would have to wait until it's night. And what's the problem? The problem is the Torah says, Lechem apanim l'fanei tamid. And if you would have to take it to the mikvah, then there would be a certain interim in which there would be no bread on it. Now, truth be told, Bisman Bayisrishin, we already learned many times that Shlomo HaMelech, by the word of God, added another 10 shulchanis. There was a total of 11. There, there wasn't such an issue. But don't forget, over there, Bisman Bayisrishin, there was no Tumas Ha'aretz. The whole Tumas Ha'aretz was introduced Bisman Bayisheni. Bisman Bayisheni, there was only one shulchan. So if that would have to be taken to the mikvah, then during that period of time, they wouldn't have a shulchan. So they would ask people not to touch it.
So people were more careful of bias research. Is that what it is?
People were not people were more careful with bias station. Correct. Well, let me add another nuance, maybe Shmuley, just to be Melamed Schus. There were less rabbinic laws during my bias station. There were less rabbinic laws. The whole Tumas Yodayim did not exist. So therefore, maybe it comes together. The rabbis began to make more takanas. And you had this group of people that they were rejecting all these chachamim. The tzedukim. So therefore, to make sure that it is going to be kept, we made these laws. Now, Chutz Mizbeach Hazav, the Rambam will explain why, and the Mizbeach HaNechoshes. Now, really, the Mizbeach HaNechoshes, Bisman, we already learned this. Even from the times of King Solomon, once we were goines the Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu. See, Moshe Rabbeinu's outer Mizbeach was made out of copper. But in the Beis Hamikdash, it was made out of stone, we learned. Stone that was never virgin stone with cement. It was cemented together. It was smeared with lime. But we still refer to the Mizbeach HaNechoshes. Now, there's so many different ways of learning the Rambam. Let's go with one approach. The Mizbeach HaNechoshes, the outer altar, cannot become tummy. You know why? Because it's connected to the ground. Let's go with that pshat. The Rambam's next liner is only explaining why the inner altar cannot become tummy. So we're going to learn in Hilchos Kelim, in Perek Yud Aleph, the following rule, that plated utensils do not contract impurity, even if they have a receptacle. Plating, that means that the outer altar was made out of atzei shitim. I'm sorry, the inner golden altar. It was not pure gold. It was made out of wood, and then it was plated with gold. Inside, yeah. But I don't know if it was inside. I don't remember that. It was plated outside. We're not talking about the Aron HaKodesh. We're speaking about the Mizbeach Hazav. And what happens is that the coating does not receive impurity because the coating is not chashuv. The coating is only considered basically subservient to the keli proper. The keli proper did not have anything touch it. It's like there's a din that it cannot become tamei.
So when you have a regular wooden plate and you dip in gold.
That's exactly what we're going to be learning in Hilchos Kelim. The keli that is plated cannot contract impurity. Now there's another nuance over here. Big kasha. The Mizbeach Hazav they never took out. How did it become tamei? Why does the Rambam even have to write that? Is a raya that they were kohen. Now, we said that Amaratzim, when it comes to kodesh, are trustworthy the whole time. And Amaretz that says wine, not during the press season. Stop. If this wine is being sold for the Beis Hamikdash, he was trusted. So why wouldn't we say that? But we don't say that. See, we say that if they touch the kelim, they make it tummy. So if it was a kohen and Amaretz, maybe he won the ketaytis. We have a chashash. Maybe that's pshat. Okay, now halacha yud beis. But if that's the case, David, what does it help? What does it help that they told the Amaratzim and the Azara don't touch the shulchan? If there's a fear that someone entered the Heichal, maybe this guy touched the shulchan. What about the Kohanim that changed their breads? Akash, I don't know. This is definitely discussed. Final halacha in the Shtat halacha yud beis. Am ha'aret sha'amar toir ani b'tumas meis. Guys, remember this because whoever's going to be learning the next chapter might get stuck here, but the Rambam didn't have to say words because he's relying that at least we'll remember from this to that. If he says, I am tired from Tumas Meis, or if he says, this Keli is tired with Tumas Meis, he's believed. Ooh. 1 second. Because everything we learned in Perek Yud is not about Tumas Meis. But let me add a nuance that we'll learn in the next chapter. If Tama'aret says nothing, there's 2 chashashes. It's Tomei B'Tumas Meis and Midras, if he says nothing. If he says everything is Tohar, they wouldn't believe him when it comes to Midras. For Tumas Meis, if he says, it's a big difference, because I know for Tumas Midras you need seven clean days. I know that. But for Tumas Midras, you don't need the ashes of the red heifer. For Tumas Meis, you need the ashes of the red heifer. Okay? If he says Tohar, he's Neman. Nevertheless, Tumas Amaretz Bilvad. Oh, I want to go back. Tumas Ha'aretz. Yeah. So, guys, Kalim is not Midras. I want to clarify. Begod the Midras. Kalim means he touched it. If someone who's tummy like a Zav, let's say, touches it, what does that become? Arishay. So you don't even need the 7 clean days. The Begodim of the Ha'aretz has a tumas midras, you have to wait 7 days, but you don't have to sprinkle the ashes of the red heifer. And if he says nothing, then you have 2 fears, midras and mace. But the tzarech harav shemesh and the tzarech hazok. And he says, Tairu, but halakech klei stam and ishus ha'ma'aretz, yes, you are also chayshish shema tamei mesu, and therefore mazan ola shli shli ushvi kechol ha'kelim and amtsoyim b'chol makom b'chutz l'Yerushalayim shalei gozer tuma ha'kelim and amtsoyim b'Yerushalayim, as we learned k'mosh yizbar b'tumas ha'sfeikos. We're going to learn this, guys, in Perek Gimel of Hilchos Avis HaTumas. We'll get there. So now that we finished Perek Yud Aleph, just to recap these 2 halachas. So guys, the Ha'ma'aretz means he's an Av. Tumas Ha'ma'aretz. Tumas Ha'ma'aretz means all of his kalim, all of his oichlin and mashkin are rishayim, with exceptions we learned in this Perek. And Tumas Ha'ma'aretz means that his begodim are tamei midras. And now we concluded that if he says, I am not tamei but Tumas meis, he always has the manus, gewaldig. Now we are beginning the final chapter of today, Perek Yud Beis. These are such foundational halachas. And you know what's beautiful is that when we learn Gemara, we don't learn this all in one place. A little bit here, a little bit there. The Rambam is putting everything together for us. Amachai. What are we going to learn in Perek Yud Beis? Based on everything we learned before, listen to how life can get complicated. First of all, it was common that when people travel until today, they are afraid that a ganef is going to break into the house. So their maskid, their kalim, they take their utensils and they entrust it to their neighbor to guard it. What's going to happen if I did such a thing? Now, when I make you into a shomer, Shmuli, a shomer doesn't have the right to use the kalim. So one might have thought, and not that I lent it to you, I'm asking you to be my custodian. Still, we're going to learn in this chapter that if you're mafkid, your kalim by ha'ma'aretz, they both are suspect, and therefore midrabanan they're tamei meis, unless they say otherwise, and they are tamei midras. Wow. Now, based on that, what's going to happen if you have a guest on ha'ma'aretz and he fell asleep in your house? Do we say you come back and he's awake? Maybe he woke up 10 minutes earlier. Maybe he walked around in your house and he touched your kalim. So we're going to get into details when you can presume that everything in your house remained tahor, and when do you have to say, since he was left in your house unguarded, that which is there became tamei. And similarly, if you have a neighbor and people used to do some of their living outside in their chatzedos or on their roofs, when will we say that if my neighbor is an ha'ma'aretz, I have to be suspect that he reached over and he touched kalim in my property? And when don't I have to have such a suspicion? Perek Shnei Masar has 23 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Hamafkid kalim eitzel ha'ma'aretz. I made the ha'ma'aretz into my custodian. Oishenosan kli, to a professional who's an ha'ma'aretz, whether he's a launderer, whether he's a fixer, right? I need my keli serviced, and the balabai is there, the workers there are ha'ma'aretzim. Harei elu by default tamei meis and utamei midras, and just shouldn't contradict that which we learned in the final chapter of Perek Yud Aleph. Obviously, we're speaking about a case where the shomer is not saying to him. If he says that never became tamei meis, we already learned. We just learned that we do believe. If the watchman knows that the owner of the kalim is a kohen who's eating truma, so then even when he doesn't say they are pure from tamei meis, to hide him in tamei meis, but still tameim midras. Why tameim midras? The pnei sheishtoi nido yoshevas alem shaloi midatoi sharei ein izarem enatomas b'batei ha'ma'aretz. Okay, halacha beis. I'm pausing over here because if the kalim also have tumas midras, just akasha, why did we learn in the previous chapter in halacha Yud Aleph that once you remove the fear of tamei meis, all you need is head of shemesh, because for midras you always have to have 7 days. Okay, halacha beis. If a person leaves his kalim, puts his kalim down in front of ha'ma'aretz, and watch these for me. So as we just mentioned, yes, harei elu tamei midras. But even if he doesn't say to hide him at tamei meis, why is that? Why is that? Because since it did not enter the domain of the Am Haaretz, I placed it down outside. Now, on one hand, he's the shomer, he might have sat on it. But we don't say that he was matamet tamei meis. If he put it on his shoulder, if I put it on his shoulder, that already tamei midras or tamei meis. Unless he says otherwise concerning meis. If a person leaves, forgets something in the shul, hadim to hide him. Because that's not called in the Rishus of Amaretz Gemura, even though Amaratzim came to shul. If I forget my kelim in a bathhouse, what's on? If I find them exactly where I left them, then I say to hide in. But we tell the person, be careful, do chaver, don't do that. If a person left his the vat in which you press the wine, his cistern in which you would press oil or other liquids. If you left it unattended, and when you return, even if you find him on its side, to hide him because he did not have permission to enter. Even though he entered, but he didn't touch. If you leave and you leave the key to your house to Am Haaretz, so now the issue is maybe he entered your house. No, he did not. Because when you leave your key with someone, Chazal say, you only gave him the shmira of your key. Doesn't mean that you gave him permission to enter. Till today, it's that way. When you travel and you leave your key with a friend of yours, you didn't mean enter my house. Just in case the key will be needed, someone in the neighborhood has the key. Kol Shabbat is taught. A chaloin means a locker. If you left your kelim in a locker in a bathhouse, and a locker that can be locked, then all aleim. Here again, even though you gave your key to Am Haaretz, still kelim to hide him, even though it's not your personal house. Here again, we say that shalei masaloi elo shminas hamafteyach. Cheinim chasam ala chaloin. Right? If he sealed the locker, or if you made another siman, even if he finds the seal ruined, it doesn't mean that someone actually touched that was in it. Could be someone opened up the locker. He noticed that it's not his, and he right away closed the door. He didn't touch it. If you leave a Am Haaretz in your house, now it's in your domain to guard whatever is there, and the owner is far away. So now it depends. If you are at least close enough that you can see who's coming and going in the house, you don't see the Am Haaretz in your house. You see others. Why is that? Because, like we began in this chapter, if you're Meiser to Am Haaretz Shmiras Kelev, the Am Haaretz is Matame. So why are we saying that you saw that no one came and went? What you did benefit, Aval Hamishkavois, Hamerkavois, Klicheres, Hamukam Summit Pasol, that remains to hide him. Such a high level of Tumas Am Haaretz they did not make when everything is in your home. But all of that is only because the only one that's in your home is the one that you designated as the shomer. But the then we say Kol Shabbat Tamei. Wow, even the mishkavos, your mattresses, your chairs, everything. And even if the shomer was left bound, or the shomer, God forbid, doesn't have hands or not feet, which means he can't move around, doesn't matter. It's like plug. Everything is tamim. Mipnei shehein b'reshus ha'ma'aretz. Like plug. Allah chaver shoyashim b'veis shel ha'ma'aretz. If the chaver is sleeping in the house of the ha'ma'aretz and the kelim of the chaver are folded and under the head of the chaver, and his shoes and his kelim are right in front of him, is it possible while he was sleeping for the ha'ma'aretz to go and to touch his stuff? Yeah, but he's going to be afraid that the chaver is going to wake up. And because Shaharehu the Ha'ma'aretz is going to tell himself, "Ooh, if I'm going to touch it, maybe he's going to wake up and see me." Halacha zayin. The Ha'ma'aretz borrowed from a chaver a bed. The Yoshin aleh b'seich beisei shel chaver, and he only slept in it in the domain of the chaver. Ein tami ela oisa mita. So that bed is tummy. I get it. And not only that, what's tummy? Anything that's so close to the bed that all the Am Haaretz needs to do is extend his hand while on the bed and touch it, that's tummy. Further not. Why further not? Because all the chaver gave him permission to sleep on the bed. The chaver did not give him permission to spatzir around the house. So he's not going to do that. Please guard for me this cow, so it should not enter the house. Guard the cow, so it should not break the kalim. That means he did not give over the guardianship of the house. He did not give over the guardianship of the kalim. He only asked him to guard the cow. So then the bais and the kalim are to him. Guard the house for the cow not to enter. Guard the kalim for not to be broken by the cow. Then he gave him over the shmir gavaldik. Then there's the meim. Halacha tes. You're leaving Amaretz lying down in your house when you left. Now, like this: if he was lying down but still awake, and when you came back he was awake, or when you left he was asleep, and when you came back he was asleep, or he was laying down but awake when you left, and you came back and he was sleeping. Here again, everything in your house is tahar. Everything in your house is tahar. In other words, the presumption will be that this guy did not go throughout your house, but he didn't see you leaving. When you left, he was already asleep. And when you come back, he was awake. So now we said, as we said in Allah Zayin, any place that's close enough that while he's still on the bed, he can touch his tamei. Gewaldig. If you leave craftsmen in your house, you have a leak. You have a plumbing issue, and the people that are coming to fix are amaratzim, as we learned in Pedikud, how to define it. Or they have the working area, anything there, or just extending their hand, that is tummy. Beyond that is not tummy. Maybe they went on a kisei, maybe they went on a ladder, and they touched the keli. But we don't say that. So she asked her chaverte, who's at Eishes Hamaretz, to come and help her grind. Afilu paskar achayim, even afilu ishtayim, ein tomi yalamokim shechalom lifsha desedem religam. Okay. So the grinding, any place that's close enough that while you're standing at your workstation and you extend your hand, you can touch all of those kelim are tummy, not beyond that. The same concept. And the other one is bolsha. Bolsha means she searched through the house. Kol shebabayis. We don't say that. Or b'shema nitlos v'asim b'mekaymis hagavayis. We don't say that. Halacha yudal. A woman was standing at the entrance of her home, and she went to take out a piece of bread to give it to a poor man. You right, yotzas. And when she goes out, she sees that the ani. When she comes back, she sees that the Ha'aretz changed his place. So maybe if he changed his place, he touched that which is around him. We don't say that. And he's standing, the Ha'aretz that you left in your house is standing now on the side of breads. Afilu truma they are tohiros. She'ein cheskos eliga shalei b'reshus. Cheno isha shiyotza. Umatzas eishes Ha'aretz choyte gecholam mitachas ha'kedera. She comes back and she finds that her chaver to the Ha'aretz is stoking the coals. We say all she did was she stoked the coals, but the kedera is tohira. And the chiddush here is even if it's truma. Halacha yad beis, gaboy hamelech, tax collectors. And we learned today in Pedek Yud that even if a tax collector prior to that profession was a chaver, automatically you lose your status. And if they enter your house to take a security for money that you owe, we say here by the tax collector, everything in your house is tummy. Because maybe he went searching. But if you have a goy, which means if you ask him, did you touch that keli? Here he's not going to lie because he's going to be ashamed to lie in front of even a goy. So you know independently that he entered, you have to be chayish that he touched everything. Or if the mashkin is in his hand, which proves you know without him saying that he entered your house. But if you don't know anything, he is the one that let you know, I entered your house. But then he right away says, but I touched nothing other than taking this keli. Then you believe him because of the general rule. Thieves that enter someone's house, they are only metame that which was in the way, in the path of where they entered. In other words, we say that a ganav is afraid to be caught, so he's not going to linger in the house. We don't say that he searched through the entire house. He only took that which was right to b'mezuma. And what will there be metama? Even there's that which is hidden, that which is b'makim hagoloi. Only the oichlin and the mashkem u'kercheres hapsuchim, but the mishkavois or the merkavois or the klicheres that are tightly sealed, the ganaf is afraid to go on the bed. He's afraid to open up a.
We don't think they're looking for stuff, Rabbi.
Yeah. So to hide him, the only looking for stuff is to come two people. It's even if the goy or isha hakol tami. As a ganaf is afraid to be caught. What happened? I got married in Crown Heights. The first time building a sukkah, a guy went into our apartment and stole something. Well, some people they go in and they go out quick. Every case when the guy had time, a ganaf here. If you come back from a trip, that's a whole different story. Halacha yudal hagaboyim haganovim that did tshuva. So it depends. If they did tshuva on their own, they gave back that which they stole, not because they were afraid of going to jail. And now that you see they did tshuva, they're saying, I didn't touch everything. Then we believe them. We even believe them on where they walked. Wow. Because he's doing tshuva. If you leave your house while the door is open and you come back and the door is open, or even if you come back and you find the door closed, or even if you left the door closed and you find it open, but you see that nothing was stolen, then we say everything in the house is stolen. Because I say, maybe a ganaf opened it. Why is the door open? But he was afraid to enter. Why? If he would have entered, he would have stolen something. A hatchet is lost in the house. Or if you put you have an instrument and you left it in this corner and you found it in another corner. How did it get there? Here you say, someone moved it. Then everything, Habai is Tomei. Now, what in the house is Tomei? Same thing that we learned before. Only Makim Raglei Haganovim. Halacha Yudzayin Ador im Amoritz b'Chatzer. What happens if you share a common yard with Amoritz and you forgot some of your kelim in the Chatzer, even if they are Chadis Mukav Samid Pasol, or even a Tana that's Mukat Samid Pasol, they are Tamei. Why is that? Because since both people have the right to go around the Chatzer, he's not afraid to be caught. But if you make a mechitza that's tall 10 tfachim, and it's clear this is my half and that's your half, then we don't say he entered your half. Chaven, Shahoy Yaloi Mechitza Yisuka Lifnei Pischa Shalom Haaretz, Shahoy Mechitza Yisuka Shalom Haaretz, Lifnei Pischa Shal Chaver. So they have to each one going through the property of the other. Here's the problem: any time someone has the right to go into the Chaver's property, everything there becomes tummy. Kelim Shabbataycha, Kelim Shabbataycha Tameim. Lifnei Sheish Lam Haaretz Besuka Zu, Abe Mechitza Zu Deshuos. Halacha you test Chaver Shoy Gagel Amaylam Gagel Shalom Haaretz. If we have a neighboring roofs, two roofs. Now, if they are on the same height, that's a big problem. But if one is higher than the other, so let me just tell you by heart what we're going to be learning. When things fall, they fall down. Nothing falls up. So if the Amoritz is on the higher Gag, he can always argue, something of mine fell into the lower Gag, and I went there to get what's mine. So there's a certain amount of reshus that he has. So he's not afraid to touch things. That will make everything tummy. But in the opposite direction, that's where we're going to begin. Chaver, whose roof was higher than the Gag of the Amoritz. For the Amoritz to go up into the roof of the Chaver, he'll be Ganev. What are you doing here? Hareze, you can lay out your kelim and you can put the harais and they remain tahar. Afal Pish Amoritz is able to extend his hand up. He won't do that. He doesn't want to be called a thief. Same thing with a goy, as we learned earlier on that the Chachamim gave every goy the din of a zov. Not because of Tumah, not because of the Ayin Nesach, because no one wants to be caught as a Ganev. But if the Gagas are aligned, they're on the same level, that the Gag of the Amoritz was above, and now is a problem. Any location where the guy standing on his property can extend his hand to the side or down, everything there is tummy, because he's not afraid to do that. Because again, he can argue, no, I was just coming and something fell into your property. If you have two courtyards, one is inside the other. If the inner one is the chaver, the outer one is of the Amoritz. In other words, the Amoritz has no right to go, has no need to go into the inner one. Then we say chaver v'niyachsham. The chaver can leave in his kelim, and he can put out kelim to dry, paytas to dry. because he won't extend his hand inwards. By a roof, things can blow from one place to the other. Here we don't even say that. If you have even the simplest barrier, a lattice barrier, you're dividing it. Here again, we're not going to say same idea. So you have a well, and the chaver's bucket fell in it, and the rope broke. The chaver went to get a new rope or to get something else to take it out. It means he left it in the reshus of Am Haaretz. Boomba! Now it's tamei, tumas meis. Now it's in the reshus. And final halacha chav gimel. Again, common things. So the wife of Am Haaretz goes inside the house of a chaver because you are watching her child and she's going to retrieve her son or daughter. She's going to take the son, the daughter, or the animal of the chaver to her. Here we say kol shubai start. I'm going to clarify. She went in there with permission to take the child, but that only means she only had permission to take the child. She's not going to go touch other stuff. Kador chaver, if you're a potter, that's your business. And and you left for a moment, you're selling your pots, you leave it for a moment because you have to go drink water. It means you left it unattended. Then we say that while you left, maybe someone touched the kalim. But if anyone touched it, they only touched the outermost kalim. So the pnimiyos are tahayros, but the chetzonius are tameis. When you left them near the Rosh Hashanah, so people that are coming and going, they know this is for sale. That's where people would sell the wares. So they felt they had the right to touch it. That's why the outer ones are tamei. But if you left it far from the Rosh Hashanah, if the tools of your trade you took with you when you went to drink water, that means that someone who walked by would not know this is from someone who's selling them. You wouldn't know that. When you find something on the side out there, no one touches it. One second. If when it looks like these items were left to be sold, then everything is tummy. It's even worse than before. They touched everything, maybe. Because if it doesn't look like this is being sold, items for sale, we're not chayish that people are going to touch them. And finally, if a chaver places food or liquids down at the entrance of his store and he enters, they automatically become tamei. Because here, Oivrim Vishavim will be memashmesh. In other words, anything that's placed at the entrance of a store, people think that this is for sale. That's it. And they automatically become